welcome to Venture Atlanta. I am so pleased to have with us here Jean-Michel Lemieux. He is the CTO for Shopify. Jean-Michel, welcome to this keynote fireside chat with Venture Atlanta. We are so happy to have you.
Thanks for having me, Alex. If people don't know, we did work together in the past, so it's great to finally have this as a forcing function for us to talk again after 6-7 years. So thanks for having me.
Most see it as a forcing function not to talk. So
yeah, exactly.
You were the exception here. Just a background on Jean-Michel. He and I worked together at Atlassian. He was one of the architects behind what turned out to be an incredible company, maker of Jira, Confluence, that generated a market cap in excess of 40 billion. And that's actually not where his story starts. He went on from Atlassian to become the CTO for Shopify in Canada at his hometown in Ottawa. And Shopify was pre-IPO at the time. It's now gone on to become in excess of $100 billion market cap company. So Jean-Michel, it is our privilege to have you here today. You are famous among the CTO ranks, but I'd like to dive into when you weren't famous, before you were famous. Talk a little bit about where you grew up, and love to see a glimpse into your early life before you were famous.
So my dad was in the military, the Canadian Armed Forces, and that pulled me around the world quite a bit, which I think shaped me in a bunch of ways. But more interestingly, I actually did fine arts in high school, music, painting, and at some point, I had a crazy idea of doing our school play. It was a Phantom of the Opera, Les Miserables mix. And I said, I think I can use a computer and my keyboard and you can fire the band. I could do the whole thing. And I remember the drama teacher was like, yeah, JML, like whatever. And I pulled out, over a week, I showed her to her and she was like, oh, you might be onto something, right? This is like 1986 or something crazy. And at some point I went to my guidance counselor. I was like, what am I doing when I grow up? She's like, there's this new field called computer science. Maybe you can play music and play with computers. And anyway, so that's I think how I ended up where I ended up, a bit of a weird.
Yeah,
detour.
it's interesting. Steve Jobs famously described how important those calligraphy classes were on his movement around design for Apple. I'm kind of curious, did the fine arts experience have a similar influence in terms of your creativeness or your effectiveness as a CTO?
I think it does. I mean, it's hard to describe. I think I've got an eye for, the artsy side. Like I appreciate design. And I think it's like with a lot of the arts, there's a technical aspect and then there's a creation aspect. Yeah. And I think in a lot of things I do, I want to I geek out on the details, but I really want to see it. Like I want to see the painting show up, not just really nice paint in a bottle,
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so as you were looking at your, what am I going to do when I grow up? That phase every kid goes through. Besides your parents, who is influential? Who helped you kind of guide your path to where you are today at an early age? Yeah,
it's funny. I think honestly that guidance counselor, like that random guidance counselor, I forget her name, for whatever reason, and we sometimes don't respect guidance counselors at school, but I owe everything to that one guidance counselor. Because I was a bit of an aloof, like you're a teenager, right? Like I had no, like I see kids in that right now, like they know exactly what they're going to do when they're 40. That was not me. And I think it's a bit of my character. I stumble between problems and they seem to have brought me to interesting places, not the end game. And I think that's why, like, it's hard to say who's influenced me. Like I didn't want to grow up to be Steve Jobs. I just wanted to do interesting things. And I think people that influenced me were people who gave me room to do that and push me, right? Like the drama teacher, my arts teacher, my math teacher, like people who are like, you know what? Like when someone pushes me, I seem to like, that's cool, So I think over my life, I've been attracted, and you'll see there's some stories later of just, I'm like, who can I hang out with? Who's going to be a good kick in the ass and inspire me and I can learn from. And that's almost been my motto for my entire life.
Well, I want to go off script there for a moment, because what that fine arts teacher did for you, I know that is part of your style in managing, where you give people room to grow and be creative and to explore on their own and to be inspired. I'm kind of curious, talk about what does that resonate, and talk about what you've done to get the best out of your teams.
I try and get people together who want to who want to create great art. I think like some similarities between a lot of companies I've been at is where we kind of are artists in a way. Like we really like this thing that we're building, you know, and although we built a company around it and in the news, like everyone's going to pull and view their lens into what actually happened. But its core is a group of people who are trying to create a really awesome piece of art.
Very cool. Very
and
cool.
I think that's driven me and I think that's influenced me, and it's kept me like I've been doing the same thing forever, you know, but there's always cooler pieces of art you can build, you know. And then,
right. That's what every great artist says.
Yeah.
So you were an Army brat. You grew up as a part of a military family, and so it'd be natural that you'd be open to opportunities around the world. Atlassian, Sydney. Just talk about the story about how you ended up there.
Yeah. So I think a bit like you, I ended up at IBM. I think every tech company at some point or smaller got bought by IBM in like the 90s and early 2000s. So my company I was at got bought by IBM. We had a pretty successful platform and product was used all over the world. And then they asked us to build this new thing. And I built this new thing for IBM with a bunch of people at Shopify, at IBM at the time. It was pretty successful, but I saw this little company called Atlassian doing something similar, but they had so many advantages on us, right? They were going bottoms up. They were, they didn't have big enterprise deals. And at the time I saw we were making a lot of money off, like 300 enterprise customers. At that point, I'm like, man, if Atlassian can see the potential of what they're doing, because their product's better, they have less constraints. It feels like that would be a cool team to join. So I remember it was November 17th. I cold emailed to Mike and Scott.
You're kidding me.
And I called my wife downstairs. I said, hey, it was like 11 o'clock PM in Ottawa. I was like, I'm about to send this crazy email. Like we might end up in Australia. And my wife was like, yeah, whatever, just come to bed. And I pressed send. And in the email I said, I think we need each other. Here's what I've done. Like, let me know if you're interested. And I think after Christmas, I was in Sydney, and my wife, who's a trooper, and my kids. Again, I think there's some Army thing here. I was like, I've got to move at some point with the family.
Yeah.
Like I want my kids to be a bit resilient, feel what it's like to settle somewhere else. I think in my entire adult life, I've always been waiting for my military posting, which was to Atlassian.
Yeah. So you spent a formative time at Atlassian. Your impact was important and significant over the years beyond your time there. I'm curious, what do you think was most misunderstood about Atlassian? What do people get wrong about Atlassian?
So Atlassian, two things. So Atlassian on the outside, had to fight by not being in Silicon Valley, and culturally, right, had really good videos, had really good values, which I think was what a lot of people remember about Atlassian. But what they didn't see was the fact, again, these are really good artists, right? Like Mike and Scott, if you work with them, and those who are listening who have know that they really, really care about this product they're building, about the company they're building. And I think I saw the power of founders who are kind of in an infinite long game.
Yeah.
There's, making good short-term and long-term decisions, and seeing how just being able to play this game longer than others and have that attention to detail about the product was really, really good. Huge amount of respect for Mike and Scott. What we're doing together was huge, really hard. I fell on my face a lot of times and they picked me up. And I think that just from a leadership perspective and when you're doing possibly one of the hardest things in the world, it's going to go sideways. And I never built a company that quickly and that fast, and reading all the books, it feels way more chaotic inside. And I think they built a really good culture of support. And I felt I felt like I could, they made it feel like I could do anything, even though it was messy, it was hard, and I screwed up a lot. And I think I thank them for having a huge influence over me, continuing along doing that and not giving up.
Yeah. So be more specific there. In terms of the leadership lessons, what would you say is the most significant leadership lesson you got out of Atlassian?
Focus your leaders on their number one job, which is creating a product.
Yeah.
And you're going to get distracted with all these other company building things, but you need leaders who actually keep the quality bar somewhere, right? Because you can have leaders who come in and they operate it, but you need leaders who are again, almost like my art teacher, making the team do better art. And I think it's hard to find, and it's something you've got to cultivate. And I think the second thing is, from a leadership perspective, knowing when to pull people up.
Yeah.
and knowing when they're done, but knowing when they've just fell on their face and they've got to come back up. I think I was actually had a pretty short temper with folks because I hadn't seen like, the full difficulty of building a company like Atlassian. And I think that was really important.
Well, I'm gonna pull that string again, because there's how do you know when somebody's done and they need to leave? Like, what do you see that tells you, you know what, it's not working, they're gonna have to go?
Usually it's self-awareness.
Yeah.
I mean, either it's going to be it's going to be like someone's not interested anymore and they're faking it. Like some people just like, you know what, like I'm actually not that interested in what we're doing. The product's not that interesting. I'm just going through the motions. But the other one is like, some people just, like they're hard jobs and it's a difficult thing. And they don't have their own self-awareness of where they've got to get to, because it's all going to be an internal growth process, and you need that self-awareness to do it. So,
and so now Shopify, you were from Ottawa, right?
Yeah, correct.
And Shopify is based in Ottawa.
Super random. Yes.
So it's almost a deal that you couldn't refuse. I'm curious though, what did you see early on once you arrived there that made you realize, oh my gosh, this thing could be huge?
I saw nothing. So this is going to be extremely embarrassing. The only reason I showed up at Shopify is I had family issues. My dad is in Ottawa. I literally had to move back. And I'd known the CEO of Shopify as an acquaintance, because every time I came back to visit my dad, I had to network with people who were building companies, and Tobias and the previous CTO. I had to pick their brains. And at some point I was picking their brains and they're like, why aren't you in Ottawa again? And then I was like, wow, that's weird. And I remember like, okay, I've got to do it. I literally did zero homework on Shopify. I mean, what I did is
but once you arrived,
actually,
when you like, oh my gosh, this might actually be another winner.
Well, what I saw from the outside, again, like founder in it for the long term, cool product, and they're pretty technology and product focused. Like I saw that from the outside, but I did not see the business at all. And once I was inside, I saw the business, and it was amazing. It was amazing because like Atlassian had a bunch of products, right, which really helped it, right? Like building products for teams. There's a lot of things that teams do, and they're going to need a lot of different types of things. And I think for Shopify, for companies, entrepreneurs, and businesses, like there's a huge potential of kinds of things that we could do. And I think I saw that. I saw us landing, stretching up into the enterprise as opposed to going from the enterprise down. But also, I mean, it's been a bit of a surprise. Like, it's not like we planned this. Like, even from, I remember I was on the floor at the New York Stock Exchange and we're ringing the bell and we're like, cool, like $17 opening price. Oh my God, that's insane. And we're like, when it hits 90, like, holy crap, like, we're going to have real trouble, So it's like, you don't plan it. And we really kept our heads down and I think realized that we're building something people wanted. And, the Shopify, what's cool is we're literally building infrastructure for the economy now, from banking to insurance to logistics and warehouses. So I think that's been, it kept me extremely interested. And
well, so maybe this might get into the artistry part of it. You mentioned about moving up into the enterprise. What's interesting about both companies is that you've had to architect for at least two major audiences. One is the kind of grassroots team, entrepreneur, basic product, and then the enterprise product that really has a different constituent and different type of buyer. And so you've had to be relevant to both at the same time. How do you do that? How do you balance those competing interests?
I think that, I don't know if I could, should I like spill the beans of what the secret sauce is here? But the reality is there's no enterprise customer who wants a shitty, terrible UX product, right? Like it's not like that, like everyone has this model of like the enterprise, they're going to like, they need something super complex and shitty and probably looks like terrible. Like actually, they like to use the iPhone. By the way, remember BlackBerry and the iPhone, and BlackBerry saying iPhone will never be useful in the enterprise, right? But so I think like from my perspective is like fundamentally, I think the gap between I'd say small, medium and enterprise is a lot bigger, a lot smaller than people think it is. And I think that's, I think once you figure that out, then, obviously there's complexities, like we need really good APIs. You need, really good partners who can actually build some of the enterprise add-ons, but at its core, both Atlassian and Shopify, it's the same product that people use.
Yeah. And so talk about what else was similar between Atlassian and Shopify. I'm just curious, like what other things did you see as commonalities? I mean, the UX is very important. You've got, long-term perspective. You got a founder-driven culture. What other similarities did you experience there, or have you experienced?
Yeah, good question. I mean, it's like comparing your kids a bit of like, I mean, they're kind of different, but they're the same. Like I can see their eyes are the same, but they're, I mean, I think like those are the main, like really the main things, right? They also had like, they did an expand strategy, which I think is interesting. Like, I think you can build a company where like you're a feature and you kind of get squeezed in to like a box. I really appreciate with Atlassian at Shopify, like, we do see that there's kind of an open field of a lot of different things we can do. And I think that was, I mean, there's companies who can have a niche and stay there and like go super, super deep, but there's like a breadth of products and expansion that was like available at both, which I think, helped the companies get to the scale they're at. Like we weren't boxed in. And maybe, this other thing that's useful actually is probably brand marketing. If you think about Shopify, you think about Atlassian, like, both companies did a really good job, like telling their stories, getting people to go, I buy into like, even like, look at the stock tickers are the same. Like they tell the story in the stock ticker, shop and team, right?
Yeah.
The team company, the shop company, like, and their ability, or our ability and Atlassian's ability to tell the story about what they're about, I think, helps kind of build trust in your customers, helps build mission alignment within the companies. I'd say that's probably pretty similar too.
Yeah. So, and in a similar way, what's the biggest contrast or the biggest difference?
It's funny. There's something actually very similar that I haven't figured out if it's been instrumental or not, but both companies were not founded in Silicon Valley. Yeah. So I think probably the two biggest SaaS companies in history up to date that have not been founded in Silicon Valley that have succeeded beyond, everyone, what people could think. So that's similar. What's different? I think Shopify's product is a bit simpler. Like we've been able to like stretch Shopify's product, like it's our core product to do more things. Whereas Atlassian's had a lot more like M&A, a lot more tuck-ins and complementary products, I think, which was kind of really good for Atlassian. Like it's been helpful at Shopify. We're building more of an operating system around commerce, right? Yeah. A bit more like the iPhone and iOS, where we actually have a pretty monolithic thing that does a lot more as opposed to more products in the portfolio. And that's maybe akin to like when you're running a business and some of the stuff we're working on, like it's hard for us to separate, into separate products. It's really just like, we're really building a commerce operating system. So I think that changed kind of like Atlassian's been, I didn't say better or different, like a lot more active M&A. We've been a bit slower because it's hard to like slap in an M&A to like, if it's not super complementary or doesn't fit in super well. Atlassian is really good, like a really, really great M&A strategy. And for us, it's been a bit harder and different. So
Chris Hecht at Atlassian was part of the Venture Atlanta panel last year on Corp Dev. So sweet. They've got a good engine there. Especially on that. So you talked about about this challenge and the coolness of having built two companies outside of Silicon Valley, two massive companies, two of the biggest in history, between Atlassian and Shopify. And Venture Atlanta is in Atlanta, and over the last few years, it's become the top conference on entrepreneurship and venture in the Southeast. And so the entrepreneurs of this region have gotten more comfortable that it can be done outside of the Bay Area, but there's still questions about how. And the number one issue that comes up over and over again is about talent, about how do I attract and retain not just raw talent or new, talent out of school, but mid-level talent, senior level talent. I've got hit on LinkedIn for this question several times. This is the question. You've done some really cool things, resourceful, creative ways of finding ways to get great talent in the world to join your team, no matter where it is. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's a super important point, because I think the most dangerous thing to do if you're, I guess, out of market, which might not exist anymore, but let's go back to like 2019 when that was a thing, is to know what you have as a raw material in your city or country or whatever, and exploit it. Don't just try and cargo call what other people are doing. And I think what we've done at Shopify is realize like we cannot move, all these senior people from Silicon Valley to Canada. Like it's going to be too much friction. So we invested a huge amount in actually hiring pretty young and growing them quicker. We're like, if we hire younger and grew them quicker, like, could that be a play? And that's what we did for a long time. And that involved things like, we actually have a full-time coaching staff whose job was there, literally like
Awesome.
coaching, going, hey,
Yeah.
like, this is gonna be hard. How's it going, et cetera. We really like worked on onboarding. We really worked on, like, we had to build an infrastructure for having a younger staff, because we just, we leveraged, I guess, some of the expertise in Canada, which we did have. We had BlackBerry, we had Nortel, we had, I guess, some companies who built the infrastructure of the internet, and we kind of like, we married those two and made sure we had the kids who were, hanging out with some of the older, gray-haired folks who'd been at Nortel and BlackBerry before, and I think that mix has been good. So we leveraged what we had, and I think my suggestion would be to, same thing for Atlanta is like, don't cargo cult, figure out what you have that's unique and lean into it, and it's going to have to be something different.
Yeah, right. So the other thing I think about you is time. Like, I think you're very resourceful and good at managing your time. I'm curious if you would just give us a window into how you manage your day, how you allow for free time to explore and to be creative, but also to use your time resourcefully to be productive. Between talent and time, that's what we got, right?
Yeah, it's hard. It's funny because I stumbled onto time accidentally in my first job when my boss quit within 2 weeks, and I got extremely overloaded. And I forgot how it happened. I Googled. There was no Google at that point, but I ended up with is it the Covey book, First Things First?
Uh-huh.
And Stephen Covey's got the great matrix, right, of urgency and importance. And he's like, make sure you stay out of the non-urgent, non-important thing quadrants, and just map your time. So I've always been like a bit of a mental model. Okay, I've got to build some like habits, because you will get sucked into the non-urgent, non-important things.
Yeah.
How do you do that? So, one of the things I like right now is what I call a 1-3-5 technique, which is every week I start and I go, what's the one thing I have to get done?
Yeah.
But like, I would like, I don't deserve to go home on Friday if I don't get this one thing done, right? Like, that's success for the week. And then 3 things that are like, I really should be able to do these 3 things if I don't get too distracted, and 5 like bonus marks.
Yeah. Right.
Things.
Right.
And then I'm like, and my week is like, if I get like the 1 and then half of the 3s, I'm like, and then I can handle all the other crap that comes at me, I'm happy.
Yeah.
So that's step 1. Step 2 is I reserve Wednesdays. I have 0 meetings on Wednesdays.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing. I still code.
Yeah.
Like, again, the artist in me, I still have side projects and things, and it keeps me excited. It keeps me connected, and I need my time to do that. And I think that's it. Like, it's like and trying to figure out quality time with people as well. Like, I'm trying to like making sure that the people I work with, that we just don't have one-on-ones, but one hack is once a year with a few people, I do a whole day. Right, I go, hey, let's go on the boat. Let's go hang out and like really get to know like the people you're working with.
Right.
Because when you're in the heat of the battle, sometimes you don't know kind of some motivation. So maybe those are 3 tips, right?
Yeah. That's great. One measure of productivity is time. And so when you look at your team and you look at the people on your development staff, how do you measure effectiveness, productivity, especially in a COVID world?
It's really important to like to understand, like, as leaders in productivity, like, are we getting towards the green path, the vision of what we're trying to be done in some reasonable way? Like, do we see that we're actually making progress on that? And I think to do that, you have to know where you're trying to kind of get to. And I think that's what I try to build. I try to build mental models of like, okay, in this area of the business, technology stack, I'm like, what would what would the Mona Lisa look like there? Right. I'm like, and then is that what we're trying to do or not? And then I'm always like literally every meeting I'm in, I'm trying to figure out, like, do people see the same like outcome that I'm trying to see? Have I communicated it? And then like every time I talk to them, are we backtracking? Or are we making forward progress? And
right.
I actually keep a notebook. I call them Shopify missions. Yeah. Is the title of it. I list all the missions that I think we're on as a team. Yeah. And every meeting I'm in, every conversation, I'm just, I'm checking that. Now, it's not super scientific. I can't measure that on, a monthly timeline, but it's my personal beacon of
right. That. And so sometimes the challenge of being so focused on mission and kind of the path is it can mitigate unintentionally even risk taking from your team. Like, people may not feel like it's safe to try something, or what do you do we always have those hackathons at Atlassian. At Shopify, do you do things that inspire risk taking or even failure?
Yeah, I think we do something similar. We got, hack days, which are the hackathons, where we go, hey, everything goes. And there's a pool of those things. Like there's kind of like this undercurrent in the company of just, if you do enough of these, that everyone's kind of has their labs, their lab experiments that, although you do a hackathon, it's never really done. People, if they're really passionate about it, will keep it going. And so it keeps this hum. I think it's almost like a lab feeling, the hum. And I can see that people are always working on it. And then there's the other part, which is we're going to actually ship this, and I think if we can keep those two things going really well, of like urgency on the missions, like we're going to do this. We decided like there's some just let's go just ship this versus the labs. And I think if you balance those really well, they feed off each other. And our hope is that like over time, right, we'll do that. We did some research at Shopify of how many actual product businessy things came out of Hack Days, and it's been extremely surprising. I don't know if you've checked out on Shopify, but there's this thing called Shopify Pay, which is an accelerated checkout. Like that was all a Hack Days app. Now it's probably our second biggest GMV running right now. Like it's what people recognize Shopify for. That was a Hack Days project. So
yeah. All right, we're at our 5 minutes, so a little bit past. So ready for a rapid fire?
Let's bring it on. Ex infantry, I can take it.
Here we go. So looking back at your life, what was the worst advice you've ever been given?
Worst advice. Holy smokes. Worst advice. Be a hands-off manager.
Yeah, that's a good one. What is one simple thing you do to manage stress?
I have dinner with my family every night.
Every night. Awesome. Yes. And how do you start your day?
Sporty. So I'll go running, go biking kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then have a shake and then stumble.
And what's your favorite word?
No.
What's your least favorite word?
Yes. Now, no. Here's why. I think.
Hey, listen, you've got vendors listening. So be careful what you're saying here.
Here's the thing about no. Let me just give me one second. No is probably one of the first words you learn as a kid.
Yeah.
And it's probably the hardest word to say as an adult. And I think no is about time management. No is about priorities, and no is about focus. And I think it's important that people relearn how to say no. Yeah.
Thanks for not saying no to this, by the way. If you were to give a book as a gift to somebody, what book would you give to a new friend?
So there's two books. The recent one is, holy shit, is it How to Not Split the Difference? The FBI hostage negotiator, who really talks about how to negotiate and use empathy in negotiation, not just force, as one book. The second book is a Canadian book called The Fifth Business by Robertson Davies. And The Fifth Business in the arts world is about kind of that character who we always take for granted, but has done amazing good things. And it reminds me that there's always people on your team that are actually carrying the weight of everything, and to be on the lookout for them. The Fifth Business, like I actually recommend, I tweeted about this recently, like I read it every 10 years, and it starts where basically a teacher is retiring, and the headmaster gave him basically, thanks, old fart, you can leave. And then you hear his story, right? Was a Victoria Cross winner, was like, just did all these amazing things, right? And I think it's a really good reminder that whenever you meet someone, there's a lot of stories behind them. Yeah. And anyway. 2 books. Sorry, I'm going way too long on that, but
no, you're giving great stories. I mean, you shared that with us today. I think to that point, my last question is this: what does Lemieux mean in French?
I think you know this, don't you?
I'm asking the questions.
Lemieux means the best.
Yes, it does. You were that today, sir. I really appreciate it. It was an honor, the privilege to have you as part of the Venture Atlanta community. Thank you so much for your time today. I'm glad you didn't say no.
It was a pleasure, Alex. And go Atlanta. Go.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye,
Alex.
Jean-Michel.
Take care.